They laughed at his silence until the truth stopped the courtroom. Don't forget to subscribe and comment where you are watching from. The courtroom was already tense before a single word was spoken. Wooden benches creaked softly as people shifted their weight. Papers rustled. The air felt heavy, the kind of heaviness that settles when judgment is about to be passed. At the center of it all stood a quiet man. He wasn't handcuffed. He wasn't pacing. He wasn't pleading. He stood still, hands folded, eyes forward. And that alone seemed to irritate the police officer sitting across from him. The officer had testified dozens of times before. He was comfortable here, confident, familiar with the rhythm of authority. Speak firmly, control the narrative, dominate the room. Courts were places where his words usually carried weight without challenge. This time felt no different. Until he laughed. It wasn't a loud laugh. It wasn't disruptive. It was subtle, calculated. The kind of laugh meant to belittle without consequence. The officer leaned slightly toward the microphone and glanced at the quiet man. He's always been like this, the officer said, smirking. Very quiet. Didn't have much to say during the arrest either. A few people in the courtroom smiled. Someone in the back let out a soft chuckle. Silence followed, but not the kind that commands respect. The kind that expects weakness. The quiet man didn't react. No anger, no embellishment, no explanation, just stillness. That stillness confused the officer, because people who are innocent usually protest, and people who are guilty usually panic. But this man didn't either. The judge watched closely. The officer continued, encouraged by the lack of resistance. He didn't argue, didn't deny anything, just stood there. Honestly, it was strange. Another laugh escaped him, louder this time. The quiet man remained unmoved. What the officer didn't know, what no one in that room knew yet, was that silence had saved this man's life more than once. Years ago, he had learned something most people never do. Words are not always protection. Sometimes they're traps. He had learned that when panic rises, silence keeps the mind sharp. When others rush to explain themselves, silence allows truth to wait. That lesson wasn't learned in comfort. It was learned under pressure. Years earlier, the quiet man had lived a very different life. Not criminal, not violent, but precise, disciplined, structured around details most people overlook. He worked in a field where listening mattered more than speaking, where one wrong word could be misunderstood, where patience wasn't optional, it was survival. He was trained to observe first, to respond last, to never give emotion control of the moment. And now, in a courtroom where everyone expected fear, he offered composure instead. The officer mistook it for weakness. That's usually a sign, the officer continued confidently. People who don't talk often have something to hide. The jury listened. The quiet man said nothing, because he understood something the officer did not. The loudest person in the room is often the one most afraid of losing control. The judge cleared his throat slightly, signaling the officer to proceed. He described the arrest. Dramatic pauses, assertive language, a narrative built on certainty. Each sentence framed the quiet man as compliant, passive, insignificant. Did the defendant resist? The prosecutor asked. No, the officer replied. Not at all. Did he deny the accusation? No. Did he attempt to explain himself? The officer smiled again. No, just stood there. Quiet. That word echoed. Quiet. As if silence were a confession. The courtroom absorbed the implication. The quiet man felt the weight of every eye now. He could feel the assumptions forming. He could sense the judgment sharpening. Still, he did not speak, because the truth does not panic. The prosecutor nodded, satisfied. The judge turned slightly toward the defense table. Defense, he said calmly. Your witness. The defense attorney stood. He was experienced, measured, unrushed. He didn't immediately call anyone. Instead, he looked directly at the quiet man. Would you like to testify? He asked. The quiet man nodded once. He stepped forward. The sound of his shoes against the courtroom floor was the loudest noise anyone had heard in minutes. He took the stand, placed one hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and then, silence again. The officer leaned back, relaxed, confident. He had already won this in his mind. The defense attorney spoke gently. Please state your name. The quiet man did. His voice was calm, clear, controlled. Notre mort. The officer's smile faded slightly. In your profession? The attorney asked. The quiet man paused, not out of hesitation, but precision. I'm a forensic audio analyst, he said. A subtle shift rippled through the room. The officer sat forward slightly. The attorney continued. How long have you worked in this field? 14 years. And what does your work involve? I analyze recorded audio, body cameras, surveillance, emergency calls. I identify inconsistencies, edits, missing segments, and contextual manipulation. The courtroom changed. The officer's posture stiffened. The attorney nodded. Did you review the body camera footage from your arrest? Yes. Extensively, yes. The officer frowned. The defense attorney turned slowly toward the judge. Your Honor, he said, with permission, I'd like to play a short clip. The judge nodded. Proceed. The screen at the front of the courtroom flickered to life. The body cam footage began. At first, everything seemed normal. The officer's voice, the street noise, the initial interaction. Then the quiet man's voice emerged. Calm, respectful, asking a question. Then silence. The footage jumped. A timestamp skipped forward. The quiet man's voice returned, mid-sentence. The room grew still. The defense attorney paused the video. Do you notice anything unusual? He asked the officer. The officer hesitated. No, he said. The quiet man spoke for the first time without being prompted. There's a 14-second gap, he said evenly. Between those timestamps, the courtroom leaned in. That gap, he continued, contains my response. The one where I stated I did not consent and requested clarification. A murmur spread. The officer shifted in his seat. The defense attorney resumed the video, this time with enhanced audio. The missing segment played. The quiet man's voice was clear, polite, firm. The officer's voice followed, irritated, threatening. The courtroom went completely silent. The officer stared at the screen. The judge leaned forward. The defense attorney turned to the officer. You laughed earlier, he said calmly, about how quiet he was. The officer said nothing. Is it possible, the attorney continued, that he wasn't quiet, but silenced? Silence. Not a sound in the room. The officer swallowed. The defense attorney looked at the jury. This man didn't remain silent because he had nothing to say, he said. He remained silent because he knew his words would speak later, when truth mattered. The judge's gavel hovered, but never struck. The quiet man remained still. He didn't look at the officer. He didn't look at the jury. He looked straight ahead, because this wasn't about humiliation. It was about exposure. The prosecutor stood, flustered. Your Honor. The judge raised a hand. Enough. He turned toward the officer. You laughed, the judge said slowly. At this man's silence, the officer lowered his eyes. The judge continued. You assumed quiet meant weakness. That composure meant guilt. He paused. This courtroom will now take a recess. The gavel struck. People exhaled for the first time. The officer sat frozen. The quiet man stood, calm as ever. And in that moment, the truth became undeniable. Silence did not protect the officer. It protected the man he mocked. Because what lies beneath silence is not emptiness. It is discipline. It is preparation. It is timing. The quiet man didn't need to be loud. He needed to be right. And when the courtroom went silent, it was no longer for judgment. It was for respect. Silence is not submission. Calm is not weakness. And the loudest voice is rarely the most truthful one. Those who rush to mock stillness often fear what patience reveals. Because when truth finally speaks, it doesn't shout. It stops the room.